Hello everyone, my name is Arya and welcome back to my channel. It has been a long while, but what else is new? This seems to be a thing that happens quite often here. I do just tend to disappear and then come back a month or two later, but this time I have good reason. So you can probably tell that I'm in a different location, different shelves, different books, and there's also a ring light in front of me that is very distracting. So yeah, quite a few things have happened. So to sort of give like a summary slash life update as to what I've been doing for the past 2-3 months and where I've been and why I disappeared. So essentially, long story short, I had graduated and I was looking for a job like crazy because I was unemployed and girls gotta pay bills, am I right? So looking for a job, I also needed to move out, which I clearly did, and now I have flatmates. What else? Yeah, eventually I did find a job and it was not a great one, so I quit recently, hence why I'm here filming a video, because I actually have time to do that now, which is lovely because I miss this. But essentially, yeah, I've been really busy with moving, packing, and then unpacking, and then setting up this room, setting up the shelves, while working a full-time job, which took a lot of my free time, and it was just so exhausting that I would just come home at the end of the day and just pass out. So I didn't have time to do anything else aside from eat, shower, and sleep. So yeah, I quit that job, so I am unemployed again, looking for a job again because the bills need to be paid, but I'll get there eventually, trying not to stress. So I thought might as well just be productive while I'm sitting at home, and yeah, here I am. So that is more or less my life update and what's been happening. Nothing major, nothing serious. It's just that I've been extremely busy and stressed and never had time to just film a video or even read as much, to be honest. So yeah. And speaking of reading, because this is a book channel, so I do like to talk about books and not myself that much, I wanted to make this video sort of like a life update and also what I've read so far this year, because I noticed that I never really made like a wrap-up or a reading update on my channel, so I thought, why not do that now? Nothing's stopping me. I haven't read that much. I mean, I've read a bit, especially before I disappeared from YouTube, but I didn't read as much as I would have wanted this year because I was sort of slumpish and I also didn't have time to read. I think in the past like 2 months I've read maybe 2 books. Yeah, I'm not happy with that number, especially with my ever-growing TBR, because I keep buying books because I am insane and I need a doctor. So that is a discussion for a whole other video. I might just film like a ginormous book haul, because I did buy a lot of new books because I genuinely have problems and I need to put myself on a book buying ban. But even if I did that, it wouldn't work. I think the only thing that would actually work would be to just not having money. Just not having money would be about the only thing that would stop me from buying books. I will probably reach that position if I do not find a job, so looking forward to that. But anyways, enough rambling. I'll just dive into what I've read since the last reading update that I made on this channel. So let's just get into it. My last reading update video I filmed and posted 6 months ago, so that was a while, and I have read some books since then. But in that video I did mention that I was currently reading 2 books, and these are the 2 books that were mentioned in that video, and I have clearly since then finished reading them. One of them is Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. I believe this is the 5th book in the series, not counting the prequel, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. There's nothing much to add aside from the fact that I believe this might be my favorite book in the series, possibly, most probably. I absolutely loved it to bits, and that ending, well, the ending of this book, absolutely left me with my jaw open on the ground. I was dead. I needed to know more. So, absolutely loved it. And the other book is Loveless by Alice Oseman. This one I also gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I remember in that video that I said that I wasn't quite into it, but that was just me just starting the book. So I usually do have trouble getting into books at the start. That's just like a general trend with me, but eventually I ended up loving it. So a little bit about the book. This is essentially following a girl, don't remember her name, Georgia, and essentially Georgia goes to college or university, and it really focuses on how everyone around her finds love one way or another, and the character struggles with that because you later find out that she is aromantic asexual. So the story is sort of a coming of age, figuring out your sexuality type of situation, and it got me really emotional. It did give me some revelations of my own, and I got to explore some things regarding my own sexuality. So this book made me realize some things, and that's why it has a special spot in my heart, because it just had affected me personally, which is not something a book often does. That is mostly why I gave it the 5 stars, because aside from that, not wanting to bash the book, I don't think is anything quite exceptional in terms of the writing or the plot or the character or anything like that. It's just mostly about coming to terms and realizing your sexuality and that it's okay to be different. So that is basically the most important part of the story, at least in my opinion. After that, I read a very, very, very anticipated book for me and everyone else on the planet that reads young adult fantasy, and that book is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. So I read this and I'm not a fan. I'm sorry to say, but I did not love it as much as everyone else loves this book. I wanted to love this book so much, and I feel like that is part of the reason why I didn't like it as much, because my expectations were just so high, especially since I do love Cassandra Clare's books, and I was just hoping that this was going to be even better than The Dark Artifices, which is like my favorite trilogy in the Shadowhunter Chronicles, but it is not one bit actually. So I initially gave this like a 4 stars, but that was way too generous. I don't know what I was thinking, but this is like a 3.25 stars for me. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this book, but just because there's a lot more books that I need to get through, but I'm just gonna say that I did film a reading vlog with me reading this book, and that was like the first reading vlog that I've ever filmed in my life, and I'm very proud about the way it turned out. It's mostly just me reading in my bed, so I hope it's not too boring, but it does sort of explain, I think, why I'm not crazy about this book. But essentially it was way too slow, nothing especially interesting happens. It was boring most of the times, and I struggled way too much to connect with the characters, and I think that's about it. But yeah, just sort of disappointed because it's literally the same plot as every other series she's written, so I wish it had something more different. But hopefully Chain of Iron will be better. I will get to it at some point, but feeling the way I feel about Chain of Gold, I am honestly not in a rush to get to that book, so I don't know when that's gonna happen, but it will eventually. After Chain of Gold, I read Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahiran. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, and that is a book I love very, very much so. So going into this one, I thought I was going to be absolutely insanely in love with it, and I wasn't. That doesn't mean I didn't like the book, it just didn't reach quite the expectations that I had set for it, seeing as I loved the first book so much. But I believe I gave this one a 4 stars. It feels like more of a 3.75 to be honest. But essentially, again, it was more or less the same issue. I struggled to connect with the story, even though this is like a sequel. I don't know, it just felt so different from Serpent and Dove. It didn't feel like it was the same world or the same characters, so it was just strange. And I wasn't crazy about the plot either, and it was slow in the beginning as well, more like for the first half of the book it was quite slow, but after that it did pick up quite a bit. And also the ending, I need the sequel now. Not much to add aside from that, but generally it just felt like it was written by a different person. So I don't know if that is just me. I guess I'm gonna have to see what Gods and Monsters is gonna read like and where the story goes, so hopefully that one is good. But this one was not my favorite compared to Serpent and Dove, but it's still a good book. It's still a good book. After that, I read or attempted to read The Summer Job, which I do not own a copy of. So this was just a book that was sent to me by the publishers on NetGalley. So it was an e-arc, and me wanting to, you know, make a dent in the books that I have on NetGalley, which are still way too many, I picked it up. And this is like a adult contemporary romance set in the Highlands of Scotland, and it's about this woman who essentially goes to this hotel to work for the summer. And the thing is, she is actually impersonating her best friend, who is a I'm not sure what you call them, but like those people that specialize in wines. I don't know what they're called, I cannot remember, but you probably know the word for that. But she goes to work as a wine specialist essentially, but she knows nothing about wines. So that is sort of the plot and how the book starts. And actually, this is my first DNF ever because it was dreadfully boring and I could not put myself through another minute of reading that book. Nothing was happening. The character was unlikable. The fact that she was just impersonating her best friend did not sit well with me at all. And it was just overall not great. Did not see the appeal in it. So I believe I DNF'd it around like 30 something percent, and I do not plan on looking back because was not a fan of it. The next book that I dove into after that disaster was A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling of their story, and it's adult romance, and there's smut in this, there is some graphic sex in this, so be aware of that if you want to dive into this. But this one I gave a 3.5 stars, and the reason why I mostly gave it that rating is the main character, Persephone. I do not like her one bit. Oh my god, she's so annoying. But aside from that, the book is actually pretty good and the writing's good as well. So I am looking forward to picking up the sequel, and I also want to read the same book but from Hades' perspective, which is called A Game of Fate. So basically, the way the book is written, this is from Persephone's POV, and there's another book which is from Hades' POV. So I really want to read that one. I think I'm gonna love it because I loved Hades as a character in this. So I'm hoping that's gonna be 10 times better, and I'm generally very excited for this. Even though I wasn't quite a big fan of Persephone as a character, I feel like there's gonna be a lot of character growth and just personal development. So I'm hoping it's gonna get better, but let's be honest, we all know that no one reads this stuff for the characters and the plot, so talking about smutty books on YouTube, it is quite awkward, I won't lie. The next book I read is another disappointment. So I did read quite a few disappointing books earlier in the year, which is not fun. I feel like that might have been the reason for a lot of my slumpiness, but the next disappointing book that I read is this one, which probably tells you nothing, but this is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I don't own the regular copies. This is like the Fairy Loot special edition copy, but essentially, yeah, I read this and so disappointed because don't like the main character. There is no character growth, no character development, there's no plot. The plot is non-existent for a lot of the book, even though it's not big. For a lot of it, nothing happens, just there's no progress within the story whatsoever. I was quite bored a lot of the times, and only like the last 100 pages were interesting. So I gave this like a 3.5 stars, which is sort of generous, but I'm hoping that the next two books are gonna be better because there has to be more plot to this. Why does everyone like this series so much? I mean, I cannot be the only crazy one that doesn't quite like this as much, right? I had high expectations. I was hoping to love it. I wanted to love it, but alas, that is not the case. So after The Cruel Prince, I decided to do some light reading. So I picked up a poetry collection, and this one is called She Will Soar by Anna Sampson. And this is basically poems by various poets, mostly women, I believe, and they're just compiled into this one collection. And I do like poetry, but this was not for me. Like, this collection did not do anything for me whatsoever. It was honestly a pain to go through, and I should have DNF'd it. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I was like, you know what, it's poetry, surely you're gonna find a few that you're gonna like. It's gonna get better. Maybe it's just the first few. No, I probably liked maybe 5 poems from the 500 that were in there. So that was quite a big disappointment, and I have since unhauled that book, and I no longer have it with me because it does not give me joy. So that is that. I also I didn't give it a rating because I didn't want to bash the book for no reason, because poetry is subjective, it's not for everyone, and everyone has different taste when it comes to poetry. So I didn't want to bash the book, but I didn't like it. Thankfully, after that poetry collection, things are sort of going uphill with my reading. So the next few books I quite liked a lot, and one of them is, well, the next one is Alice by Christina Henry. This one I absolutely loved to pieces. I love this book so much, and I cannot wait to read the sequel, which I do have on my shelves somewhere. But this was disturbing. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, I believe. And just letting you know that if you do want to go into this, trigger warnings for I think that's most of them. I might have forgotten a few, but it's not a pleasant book to read. But this is essentially, as you can probably tell from the cover, this is like a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but make it horror and like disturbing, and I loved it. I really liked Christina Henry's writing as well, so I have made it my mission to read all of her books, all of them, and I have accumulated almost all of the books that she's written, and I will get to them hopefully sooner rather than later, because this TBR is ever growing. But yeah, I loved this one. If you like disturbing, messed up horror stuff that reads quite fast, I would recommend this. After that, I was still in sort of like a creepy, eerie mood, so I read Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland, and this is a YA fantasy with very eerie, dark atmosphere. So this book is very atmospheric, and in here we follow our main character, and she can sort of soul walk or like dream walk, which is essentially the same thing in this book. And the one thing is that she cannot enter her own soul house of sorts, and there's like a darkness within her. The way the synopsis puts it is way better than I would explain it. So essentially, there's always this black door wherever she goes in the dream slash soul realm, and her mother always warns her never to open the black door, but one day she does and things happen. This is what intrigued me and made me so curious about this book. I was like, what is behind that black door? I need to know. So I read it and I found out, and it was very interesting. Let me just say, this is like one of the most unique plots I've ever read. Amazing. And the queer rep, we're loving it. So the queer rep comes from the main character being asexual, I believe, and possibly aromantic, and it puts an interesting perspective on it because there's sort of a romance in here, but not really. So I liked it. I do believe the character might be demisexual, but that is just me. I don't think there's any official mention from the author regarding that. I would very much recommend this book. It is very unique, very atmospheric. It's actually a debut, I think, and I could not tell you reading this, like I couldn't tell. It was amazing, and I have the author's next book on my shelves, and I very much want to read that because it's about polyamorous blood mages. So my body is ready, but this was also amazing. And I don't know if I mentioned it already, but I gave this 4 stars. After that, I decided to go back to the world of Sarah J. Maas and Throne of Glass. So I picked up the next book in the series, which is Tower of Dawn. And this one is more or less set at the same time chronologically as Empire of Storms. So in here, you don't get to see what happens after the ending of Empire of Storms, which I was not happy about because I needed to know. And I generally did not have very high expectations for this because in here you follow a character, and I'm not gonna say who because that might be considered spoilers by some, but I was not a great fan of that character. But let me just say that by the end of the book, the character had made a lot of growth and development and just became a better person, and I came to love the character quite a lot, and I came to love the book quite a lot, which I was not expecting. I was just sort of like, meh, do I really need to read this now? Can I just start Kingdom of Ash and just be done with this? But no, you cannot. You need to read this. So really liked this one. I also gave it a 5 stars because it was great, and there's some plot twists in here, that made me gasp, and it was just overall a good book. And the fact that it just made you wait for Kingdom of Ash and in order to let you know what's gonna happen next, the anticipation just, you know, sort of makes it better in my opinion. So there's also that. After Tower of Dawn, I wanted to switch things up a little bit and just dive into a different fantasy world, something new, something undiscovered. So I actually started The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen, and this one I gave 4 stars, I believe. And this is another very unique fantasy in my opinion, because the world is sort of built on a caste system, and every caste is based on a different bird, and every bird has like a different birthright and a role and like rank within the world. So the fact that it's based on a caste system is quite unique in my opinion, and you essentially follow a band of the lowest caste, which are the crows, and the crows have no birthright, and basically their job is to rid their world of people who are infected by the plague, the sinner's plague as they call it in the book, because the crows for some reason are immune to the plague, so they're the only ones who can handle the sick people without dying. You essentially follow a band of crows and stuff just keeps on happening to them, and this is quite good. And if you're wanting to pick up a fantasy duology that is very unique and is kind of slow paced but worth it in my opinion, and has lovable characters and just gives you stress all around, then I would definitely recommend this one. After that, I picked up a very anticipated release for me, and that was House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This book I love with every fiber of my being. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and if I could give it more, I probably would. This book was so great. Again, quite a few trigger warnings here, like blood, body horror, grief. I think that might be it, mostly. But just check trigger warnings before you get into this. But I honestly wouldn't even know where to begin with explaining the plot for this. I would recommend people to go into this completely blind, just having in mind that this is a very unique story once more, and it is very atmospheric, and I don't think you will expect what is in this. There's no way anyone can figure that out. I came close, but not all the way, like not even close. So essentially the story starts with these 3 sisters, and they had disappeared for a month, I believe, when they were little girls, and you follow them years later when they're sort of estranged with each other, at least the older one is, and suddenly the oldest sister disappears again. So the 2 younger sisters try and figure out what has happened and where their sister has gone, and just a lot of mysterious stuff happens. But yeah, I'd rather leave it at that and don't say anything else, because vagueness is best going into this. It was just absolutely fantastic. This is one of those books that I wish I could just erase from my memory and read all over again from the beginning, not knowing anything, because I don't even have the words. I don't even have the words. And I also wanted to like start the book again as soon as I finished it, and that doesn't happen often, so that might be saying something. After House of Hollow, I wanted to pick up a contemporary book, so I picked up Felix Ever After by Kaysen Calendar, and this was so good. Could not recommend this book enough. Honestly, it deserves all the hype that it has on the internet. It was so emotional and touching and inspiring, and I love Felix with every fiber of my being. This character deserves the absolute world, and it was just so good. It was good. And I believe, as someone who is cisgendered, that it really does give an insight into how trans people feel. Regardless of anything, read this book. This is great, but also keep in mind some trigger warnings, especially in regards to transphobia and dead naming. That is quite a big part of this book, so do keep in mind if that is triggering for you, but if not, then definitely read this book. It is absolutely amazing, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. So after Felix Ever After, I thought I'd be a responsible reader and make some progress into the series that I've already started. So I decided to pick up Knife Edge by Mallory Blackman. This is the sequel to Knots and Crosses, which I read quite a while ago, I believe, and I did enjoy. However, I wasn't crazy on it. I thought it was just time to just continue the series, so I started reading this, and this essentially follows the aftermath of the ending of Knots and Crosses. And this book was my second DNF of the year. I believe I reached just after the midpoint, so around 60%, I believe, was where I DNF'd it, and I was bored beyond my wits. And the main character in here, who is Sephi, a character from Knots and Crosses, became so unlikable and so annoying, and I wanted to love the series. Like, I think the concept is amazing, and what the author is trying to do and trying to convey to white people through the series is absolutely fantastic, but the rest of it, like the plot and the characters, just no. Like, I didn't like Knots and Crosses that much to begin with, for different reasons. That one was just felt too youngish and naive for me. But this one just felt unbearable and just too boring, and life is too short to read books that you're not into, so I just decided to DNF the book and just DNF the whole series, because I have a feeling that it's not going to get much better after this, because it's still quite romance based from what I've seen. So I just rather leave it at this than just hate the series. So there's also that, and that is essentially all the books that I've read in the past 6 months. And this also brings me to the books that I'm currently in the middle of, and I have been in the middle of for the past like 3 months because I haven't been reading anything. So essentially, I am currently reading Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and The Faithless Hawk by Margaret Owen. So the way we got here is essentially I started reading Kingdom of Ash, and it was very slow in the beginning, for me at least. I didn't have the patience, and I wanted to know what's gonna happen, so I decided to just like put this away for the time being. So I believe I started reading both of these at the same time. This is an audiobook and this is a physical book. I was kind of switching between these two depending on the mood, and wasn't really feeling any of them, to be honest. So, and I decided to not be insane and start a fourth book, so I decided to go back to Kingdom of Ash. So I was just sort of like juggling all three of these at one point, just reading a little bit from each of them depending on what mood I was in. But recently, essentially just after I quit my shitty job, I felt the urge to read again, which I'm so happy about because I honestly miss reading and I miss everything that has to do with books. I miss booktubing, I miss taking book pictures, everything, the whole shebang. So I decided to really commit to Kingdom of Ash, and boy, I have committed. I have read almost the whole thing. I just have like less than 200 pages left and I'm nearing the end, and I honestly flew through this, which I did not expect because this is a big book. This is a chunky boy. At some point I thought it was, I'm never gonna finish this. It's never gonna end. It's just so big, but slowly made my way through this. The story is really good. It does keep you on your toes constantly. There's wars and battles happening everywhere, as you would suspect, because it's the last book in the series, and honestly it is really good, and I can tell you how exactly it's gonna end. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that it's gonna be good. So not gonna say anything else about this because it's the last book in the series and don't want to spoil anyone. So I guess you will find out my rating in a later video, but for now that is it. As for the other two books, this one, if it seems familiar to you, is actually the sequel to The Merciful Crow, and is also the conclusion because it's just a duology, and I'm not very far into it, but it is again very slow paced, so you need to have patience while reading this book, but it is pretty good. Like, the story is interesting and I do want to continue. I will continue as soon as I'm done with Kingdom of Ash, so I am curious how it's going to progress because from what I remember things aren't great, so gives me anxiety just to think about this. But so far from what I've read, it is good and I cannot wait to continue. And the third book that I'm currently in the middle of, Red, White, and Royal Blue, this is a male adult romance, and it is essentially following the Prince of England and the first son of America, and there's like a romance blooming between them, and it's sort of enemies to lovers, but also not really. It's not a very intense trope, but it's really good. It's very funny, and I believe the audiobook is amazing. This book honestly just cracks me up. I don't think I've ever burst out laughing while reading a book, so this was a first for me, and I really hope they get a good ending. I'm hoping. Love them both. It's very adorable and funny, and it's just good all around. My only complaint with this is that is quite politics heavy, like all the admin that goes behind politics, which makes sense considering like who are the characters, but it just, I don't care about the politics, so at least in the book. So that's like my only tiny complaint about it. There you have it, folks. Those are all the books that I've read in the past 6 months / currently reading and making my way through them. And yeah, I do hope you have enjoyed this video and that the ring light in my glasses was not too distracting, because it sure is for me. I thought I would get a ring light because now I can film during the night. It is pitch black outside and I can film in like good lighting, I hope. So that is an upgrade. So yeah, I forgot how I end my videos. It's been that long. So I do hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you soon in another video, hopefully. Fingers crossed that it does happen, but I have a good feeling that it will. So without any more rambling, I'll just let you go because I've talked your ears off, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye!